Hello, I'm Allison Thorpe, and this is God Talk, recorded and produced in the bluegrass state of Kentucky, the home of horses, hills, hiking, hillbillies, big trucks, wildcat basketball, and Daniel Boone, the state where guns are honored and shoes are optional. This is the show where science, faith, and culture are discussed openly.
Welcome to God Talk, a show where a rocket scientist and a medical doctor, who is also my pastor, talk about science and religion. I'm your host, Doug Thorpe, and with me as always is my co-host, Dr. Andy Wyatt. Today on God Talk, we welcome our guest, Dr. Tom Pannuti. He's been on our show before, talking about the Big Bang and dark energy, dark matter, and we have him here tonight to help us with the Christmas star. Christmas is coming on, it's really soon, so we're need some questions about what in the world that star could have been. So, Dr. Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, Doug, this sounds like quite a show. It is the Christmas season. Like they say, baby, it's cold outside and it's warm in here. And Christmas is on its way, and people are doing shopping and traditions for Christmas. And so I thought it would be a good idea, as you did, to talk about the Star of Bethlehem, or the Christmas star, that guided the Magi, the wise men from Babylon over and to the place where Jesus was. What in the world was this? Is there any scientific explanation for it?
How in the world do we match up what's in the Bible, what's written in Matthew?
Yeah.
That gave a good description several different times of what was going on. How do we match it up with actual celestial objects, right?
Exactly. With what we know about science and astronomy today, is there any way to bring those two things together? So I'm hoping Dr. Pannuti, who is an astronomer and a astrophysicist, can give us some serious scientific exegesis on this today.
All right.
But first, this is God Talk, where we faithfully examine science and we reasonably examine faith.
And this is God Talk, bringing candy for the thinking Christian, a bad day for the atheist, or a provocative question for the seeker.
All right, we'll get Dr. Pannuti. So today we have Dr. Thomas Pannuti, professor from Morehead State University.
And as I was mentioning to offline here, that Tom was our very first first professional interview, and he's also our first repeat interview. So,
yeah, we talked to him about Big Bang cosmology. It was a great show, and we're glad to have him back. And because the season is such that Christmas is upon us, we thought astronomy and cosmology comes to the mind again because of the importance of the star that guided the wise men from Babylon, or in the east, to the birth of Jesus. And of course, there's a lot of tradition about this. There's certainly, it's in the Bible. There's certainly lore about it. Jewish tradition, Christian tradition from the first century. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. And we thought, let's get a cosmologist on to talk about what could this have been, what are some of the options, what can we know, what do we have to just guess about. But we certainly know that at the time of Jesus' birth, there was a star or some kind of luminescence in the sky that guided them there. And so we'll start there. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, great to be back on here again. Hope you guys are doing well.
Yeah, it's really good to have you.
Oh yeah. Good to have you, Tom.
It's good to be back.
Okay, so some of the things we're trying to figure out is what in the world could this star have been? The Christmas star, the Star of Bethlehem. What in the world could that have been?
Yeah, and I'll just toss out some of the ideas, and we can bounce those off, because I'm about as far from an astronomer as it could be. But I've heard ideas like a supernova, comets, that it could have been a Jupiter or Saturn, or an accumulation of planets. And some of these are, stargazers have many ideas about what it might have been. But these are some of the things we hear about. So what do you think, coming at it from the science?
It's a very good question, and there's a lot of challenges in trying to understand it. And we have challenges on a couple different fronts. There's some uncertainty about exactly what year Christ was born in. and
Sure.
some believe it was 3 or 4 BC, and there are maybe earlier, maybe later. So your first challenge you have is, of course, trying to figure out exactly what year this took place.
Yeah.
Another challenge you have is trying to interpret some of the clues from the Bible. As you know, the story when the angels appeared to the shepherds,
Mm-hmm.
it was said that the shepherds were watching over their flocks. And my understanding of, now I'm a city kid from New York, so I really have no experience with sheep. But as my understanding is that, sheep are only going to ewes are only going to lamb in the spring months.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a clue there. But another challenge we have, of course, is the English language in 2016 has many, 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 many words. But the language which Scripture was written in, of course, it's hard to translate because the word they used for star referred to a broad range of phenomena.
Right.
It wasn't just stars you mean, but it could also be planets and the like. So we've had all these challenges in trying to investigate this. But there are astronomers who, in the time, this is really fascinating astronomers over history about trying to figure out what this could have been. Even Kepler, who's famous for his work on the laws of motion, actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the object could have been. And so we have some ideas, and the challenge, unfortunately, is while we can propose some, we don't really know. It's really hard to really kind of rule something out, for example, or say something that could really stand out. So I was looking, you guys sent me a list of some of the possibilities here, and there's been a couple which have kind of suggested here. And for example, one thing which has come up is the idea of a comet.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys may have heard about this. There was a medieval painter named Giotto actually painted a nativity scene with a comet as the Star of Bethlehem. And in the 1980s, when Halley's Comet's closest approached our part of the solar system, a probe which was launched by the European Space Agency was named Giotto in tribute to him. So that, of course, we know that comets can be very bright, comets can be very dramatic as they turn in the sky. Again, we're hampered because we don't really know exactly when Christ was born.
Well, wait, let me stop you there for a second.
Sure.
All right. Does anybody understand why in the world Jesus Christ was born 3 to 6 years before Christ? I've never understood why he was born in before Christ was born.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to anybody?
Well, the dating probably lagged behind the event, I guess. But that's a very good point. I assume you're making it. It's funny, but I think it probably has to do with that. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
we think it's somewhere near zero.
Near zero, not 3 or 6. It's like
and that's the two things. The other thing is these wise men had to travel for years over there, so they probably arrived several years after he was born as well.
Yeah.
We would assume.
Yeah.
So there was also a process there. And I want to back up too and just say when you mentioned a comet, for people like me who don't understand that much about astronomy, what is a comet to begin with, and why would that even be a contender, or is it a contender? I guess in your mind,
Sure, it is a contender. A comet you can think about is a body left over from the formation of our solar system. They're often called some of the most primitive bodies in our solar system.
Okay.
What we believe is when the solar system first formed, the certain particle formed out of a cloud of particles. And these particles, the ones that were left over, were actually swept out to basically the extent of the sun's gravitational sphere of influence. And they formed actually lots of icy bodies very far away from the sun, taking millions of years to complete orbit, kind of in a spherical distribution around the sun, something called the Oort cloud. It was named after this astronomer named Oort, who first postulated that this is where comets come from. And what we speculate is that when something like just a little nudge from a gravitational pull from a nearby passing star can cause one of these comets to start to fall in toward the sun. It perturb its orbit so it falls into the sun. And it can take a really long time to actually reach the sun as it falls inward. But the belief is that comets, since they're now such large distances, they can actually develop very thick mantles of ice. They're often called dirty snowballs. That's the model which is used to try to describe them. It's ice molecules are also mixed in with some other carbon compounds too. But what happens is, as these comets get closer to the sun, they sublime. We've all watched carbon dioxide and dry ice, sublime go straight from from salt to gas phase. So it sublimes off the surface. And then as these particles interact with the solar wind, these particles can actually be pushed far behind the comet. So you can actually have a very luminescent trail traveling behind comets. And the ancients had known about these. They had seen some of these. In fact, the term disaster comes from comets. Disaster, it means bad star. And when these comets were seen, they were thought to be negative omens, that war or famine was about to happen. But they can be very prominent, and they can be seen by many, many people. So it's something which, of course, this is 1,600 years before Galileo first starts to look through a telescope at the sky. So this is all still naked eye astronomy. And what the Star of Bethlehem must be is something that would appear to be very apparent. So there actually has been some studies. The best records we have going back in time are from the Chinese civilization, going back thousands of years, and some of the records they have made of what they saw in the sky. And there's a couple candidates around that time as naked eye comets, but nothing really is an airtight, a particularly robust candidate, really, for that. So we think it could be a possibility, but we can't say it's definitely this comet. It's definitely this comet which fits all this billing. And I know it's also in part of what you're saying, some of the text that you sent, from the scripture, it says that the comet, the Star of Bethlehem, was visible during the day and came to rest at a point above Bethlehem. And that's something that astronomers are having a very difficult time trying to figure out. Because as the Earth rotates, you can imagine the sun is attached to a sphere, which holds around the Earth. And as the Earth rotates, you can imagine that the sun is actually carried across the sky. So it's not just the sun rising and setting, but stars can rise and set as well. The challenge is just then that because the Earth is rotating, nothing really seems to appear to be fixed at any position. So it's hard for us to understand the phrase about something coming to stay fixed in the sky over a position.
Well, maybe I can help there.
Sure.
If you're on one mountain range and you're looking ahead at another mountain range, and Bethlehem is on that other mountain range, and you see a comet with a large tail, and the tail is pointing straight to a house. Well, by the time you walk over there to that house, it could be hours or it could be a long time, but by the time you get there, the comet is no longer there. And so it could have disappeared. So it could have said, okay, well, it was pointing at this house for that momentary time while we're...
Yeah, it's hard to know what they're actually describing in the language, whether they're saying moving and rising, and whether those terms mean something literal or totally figurative. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what it was doing, but it...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, it's a challenge to understand. I see what Doug is saying. Of course, comets have that, they're extended objects as we see them, so you could, in some ways, they could kind of appear to be pointing in a direction. We just don't know what was really meant by Doug has a point there. We just think that we know that objects always kind of rise and set in the sky. Now, you may know that the North Star remains relatively fixed in the sky here, but that is the North Star, can help you find north, obviously. Sometimes there's truth in advertising, after all. While it can help you find that, it's only helpful for finding one direction. And also, there's a phenomenon called precession, which means that the object, which, long story short, where the North Pole of the Earth points in the sky, it doesn't always point toward a particularly bright star. Right now it does, but in time, as the Earth wobbles like a top, eventually the North Pole will start to point away from Polaris. So, but yes, when you mentioned the comet, I was also looking at some of the other suggestions you had, and there was some of these were intriguing. I hadn't heard about the one about a supernova in the Andromeda Galaxy. Andromeda Galaxy is the nearest spiral galaxy to us. On a clear night, you can actually see with the naked eye it's about 2 million light years away.
Really?
Yes, I mean that's a possibility. That's the funny thing about the Andromeda Galaxy. It's forming stars. We know that we can make observations and we can find remnants of supernova explosions in that galaxy, but we only know of one supernova that's taken place in that galaxy back in 1885. And it's kind of puzzling to astronomers that after all these years, no one has reported in recorded history more frequent supernova explosions in that galaxy. So that would be a possibility because it's only 2 million light years away. A supernova could definitely be in that galaxy, could definitely be visible to the naked eye. And that, again, unfortunately, since the Andromeda Galaxy moves in the sky as the Earth rotates, it would be a remarkable object for being bright and for coming really out of nowhere. But again, we don't really know how to interpret what's meant by something which is staying still, appears to be fixed in the sky.
Let me bring this up for a minute. The point of the navigation. I mean, how much do we have to put onto this body, this luminescent body in the sky? How much do we put onto it to be guiding them in the direction west? I mean, basically what they're doing is they're in Babylon or somewhere in Iraq, and they're looking to basically southwest, I guess, if you look, across to go to Jerusalem. I mean, you see what I'm saying? I mean, what would it require for a star of some sort to at least guide you, to be prominent enough to say, wow, that's, they had to notice it and say, this is something different.
We need to go follow that.
Yeah, we need to follow that. So it had to be noticeable. It had to be leading them west, and it had to be there long enough to be prominent for that period of time. So I guess those are the qualifications of the navigation. Yeah. What do you think? I don't know. That's what I'm...
Well, I mean, if it would have been a star or something other, it would have been, starting them in the east. If it was a supernova or whatever, it would have been starting in the east, going overhead, and setting in the west. So
yeah,
that's not, you can't follow that. So
that's what I'm trying to do, is put together how this would allow you to navigate towards for some period of time.
I could imagine that if you if you're saying, of course, they're coming from Iraq headed toward Bethlehem, they would be headed from where they're going in the southwest direction.
Yeah.
So maybe at the time there could be you guys also mentioned the idea of maybe the supernova in our own galaxy. And we have records of many of those going back about 2,000. Well, about 2,000 years, we have reliable records of observations of bright supernova explosions. Of course, it was only known in the 20th century what a supernova explosion really is and the death of a star. But we do know of historical records of these. And the brightest one took place in the year 1006. And it was actually so bright that you could, that it was reported that people could read manuscripts at midnight by the light of this object. And this was actually something, this one's actually in the constellation of Lupus, which is actually a southern constellation. So from Europe and such from there, they would actually get not very high above the southern horizon. So I'm seeing what you're saying. I think it could be a possibility. We know of a couple. We know of some historical supernova explosions, which some of them are called. For example, there's SM-1006, which is, of course, took place in 1006. There's Kepler supernova, which was in 1604. There was Tycho supernova in 1572. But we know of some other supernova explosions which should have been observed, but we don't seem to have any records of them. In terms of the brightest X-ray or radio supernova remnant in the sky, it's what's called Cassiopeia A, which we know we can see how fast it's expanding. We can go backwards and say, okay, it exploded sometime around 1680. There's been no records of anyone seeing a supernova explosion in 1680 in that direction of the sky, and that's kind of puzzled astronomers.
Okay, well, let me break in real quick and ask you to, in very simple terms, tell us what a supernova is.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay. Okay. Well, usually I describe this with sock puppets, but instead I'll try this on radio. Okay. Yeah, okay. If you want, supernova explosions are associated with the death of stars. And we think that basically all stars, they burn fuel in their cores, and eventually all this fuel is going to run out. And as the fuel runs out, it dictates kind of how the star ends its life. So there's two ways you can get a supernova explosion. The first one is the death of a massive star. Now, stars can come in a wide range of masses. We think of our sun, and our sun's kind of toward the middle in terms of the observed range of masses of stars. Some of the lowest mass are only about 10% the mass of our sun. The highest masses are about 80 times the mass of our sun, maybe more. And for these, the crazy thing about stars is the more massive stars have a shorter lifetime, even though they would have more fuel, just because they have to burn through their fuel more rapidly in order to stave off, to keep themselves from collapsing under their own mass. So what happens is these very massive stars, when they run out of hydrogen fuel, they become contortionists in that their core of these stars collapse and become hotter, and they can start to run the fusion process to actually generate more energy. Now, fusion is when you assemble larger atomic nuclei by combining smaller atomic nuclei. The sun right now is generating helium by fusing together hydrogen atoms. But what you can imagine is nuclei of atoms are positively charged, and if you try to put together nuclei together, they both are positively charged, they'll repulse each other. You need them to be hotter. If you want to try to have nuclei with more protons participate in fusion, you need these nuclei to be moving faster and faster for this fusion to occur. And to do that, you need a higher temperature. So the most massive stars, and you can think about these if you've ever seen the stars of Orion's belt. Those stars are all about 20 times the mass of their sun, and they'll one day perish in supernova explosions. When they come to their end, after they go through a couple cycles of first burning hydrogen to helium, then helium to carbon, and then burning elements up to iron, all of a sudden these stars will collapse upon themselves because there's nothing left over. There's nothing to support the star from collapsing upon itself. When it doesn't fuse energy anymore, there's nothing to support the star against its mass. Gravity pulls in, and gravity can actually is actually going to fall down on the center there. And because the center can be very dense, a shock wave can actually propagate out from the center and push the outer layers of the star out. One professor in New Mexico demonstrated, I studied out in New Mexico, one professor demonstrated this by putting a tennis ball on top of a basketball, and he dropped it. And when the basketball reached the ground, the basketball would transfer all its energy to the tennis ball, and the tennis ball would take off. And he said he learned the hard way he has to do this lecture outside and not in the lecture room, because all of a sudden the tennis ball can be a very high-speed particle. So what can happen is this is how these massive stars die in supernova explosions. They rip themselves from the inside out, and that's one kind of supernova explosion. And I'm almost done, I promise. The other kind of supernova explosion is what's called the death of what's a white dwarf in the binary system. Most stars actually exist in binary systems, two stars close enough to each other, they orbit around each other. The sun is by itself, that's only an aberration. You can have in a binary system that one star is what's called a white dwarf star. And this is an old evolved star. These are stars which are basically very highly balanced together in their own gravity. They're left over the cores of stars which don't fuse hydrogen anymore. So they're hydrogen poor, but they're carbon rich. And as I tell my students, what is carbon under high pressure? They tell me a diamond. And I say, that's right. This is the fate of the sun. The sun's going to end up as a giant diamond floating through space. So what happens is these white dwarfs, these binary systems, one can siphon the white dwarf can siphon mass off from the companion. And these white dwarfs, according to for the courageous, they can look this up about the top masses of white dwarfs. If they start to gather mass from a companion, if their mass exceeds a critical mass, something called a Chandrasekhar mass, it can cause the white dwarf star to explode, and that's the other type of explosion. And the deaths of the white dwarf explosions are more luminous than the deaths of the massive stars. So the white dwarf stars are seen from very large distances, and our understanding about the expansion of the universe is from detecting these white dwarf supernova explosions at large distances, very far distances away from us.
So it is possible then that there could have been two supernovas. I mean, there's really two times we see the star. One time guiding them towards the west, and then from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. I mean, it's possible that God could use a natural manifestation like this.
If the supernova happened very close to behind the sun, you're only going to see it just as the sun is getting ready to rise. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Some of these supernovas, the sun is actually changing its position in the sky. As we orbit around the sun and see the sun take a path through the stars in the sky. So the sun is not going to be fixed from day to day. It's going to change its position slightly, but over weeks and months, the sun would change its position. You can imagine that stars are so far away that stars are basically fixed in position. So we might see a supernova explosion which is close to the sun's sky initially, but in time, the sun and the supernova, the distance between them will increase.
Well, yeah, but if it's just for a week, it should be, if it's just a week or a very short time, less than a month, and the supernova happened close to behind the sun, that they only see it for a very short time, and they'll see this big bright star.
But it gives you the direction to move towards.
Yes.
So that's a question though. How long did this have to be available? In the sky.
It guided them
to navigate.
Well, if I saw it and this is okay, hey guys, let's get together. We got to go toward that, right?
Yeah.
And so they start following it,
right?
And then they can't find it anymore. They end up at Herod's, So they could have been just, 2 weeks later. If guided them for the first week or two, then it doesn't guide them anymore.
Then it says it showed up again when they went to Bethlehem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so there could have been a second supernova.
The second one, that's what I was saying.
One of the other things it talks about here, Tom, is a conjunction between Jupiter and Regulus. So,
yes,
what is Regulus?
Sure thing. It is thought, right, what astronomers believe right now, the most favorable alignment is what's called a conjunction, and predicted that it took place in 3 BC or 4 BC. I forget what each one is. Regulus is what's called a first magnitude star. Astronomers measure the brightnesses of stars based on what's called a magnitude system. And the system is such that the lower the number is, the brighter the star appears to be. So as I tell my students, it's a lot like golf scores. So the lower the number, the brighter. So we have, so the first magnitude, Regulus is one of the first magnitude stars, one of 25 brightest stars in the sky. It's the brightest star in the constellation of Leo. And a conjunction is to an astronomer, is when two objects appear to be close together in the sky. Mm-hmm. This can be planets appearing close to each other. It can be a planet in the moon. It can be a planet in a star. So yes, my understanding is that there was actually 3 or 4 BC, there was a triple conjunction which took place, which involved Jupiter and Venus in Regulus. And when we, of course, so right now what we can do is we can actually model this, and we can say, okay, we know enough about the motions of planets to say, okay, back 3 or 4 BC is when this took place, and we can see that all these actually gathered together. And you're right, you would actually see the combined light of all 3 of these bodies because the human eye can't see the distance separation between them.
Okay.
Now that could be an event. The advantage of that event is we could certainly predict when it took place. We could also say that it has, over time, you could imagine people who are watching, looking at this, we'll see everything start to get closer and closer together. So it's not a one-night-only phenomenon. You can actually see everything draw together.
That's important. Yeah. Over time.
Yes. And if the wise men are astrologers, that's one my understanding is that to some, the wise men are thought to be astrologers. They certainly would be looking at the motions of Jupiter and Mars and the planets, and so they certainly would be aware of it. That they would be paying attention. The planets change position over time in the sky while stars appear to be fixed, so they could see how, which planets are pulling close together, or where planets are located relative to each other.
Well, in our last show, we talked about King Nebuchadnezzar came over to Israel and got the wisest and the strongest and the best looking and what have you, the best of the Israelis, and took them back to Iran, or Iraq. Yeah, he took it back to Babylon. And so these wise men very well could have been descendants of that Jewish group. And so they know all the stories. They know about the prophecies and everything. So
I think that's how they got there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Daniel and his friends, and these would have been grandchildren of him, were, it talks about in the Bible, they were geniuses. I mean, they were bright children. They were leaders. Nebuchadnezzar saw in them something he could use, right. And so he took them and left the slaves. So my guess is that these are very wise people who would have been, for that time, astronomers for that day. Yeah.
Right.
And they would have known that.
Yes. I mean, for millennia, astronomers and astrologers were the same because they gave forth the look right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes, that sounds very plausible too. It's the idea for this conjunction is just because we can prove that this is where these bodies were in the sky. That seems it's the most palatable to astronomers because they can still work with that. But certainly we can't rule out the other phenomena. It's just things like comets and supernova explosions are not regular phenomena, so they're harder for us to predict.
So how bright was the triple conjunction between Jupiter, Venus, and Regulus?
It would definitely be visible to the naked eye.
In the daytime?
I'm not sure about that. If you knew where to look, maybe you'd see it, and you'd have to. If you're not close to where sun is in the sky, but there are phenomena which have been seen during the day. Some of the historical supernova explosions we have seen during the day. Some comets have been seen during the day too. And I mean, astronomers can use. In the when the telescope was invented, we could certainly observe. We could predict where planets would be. We could use telescopes to try to observe planets during the day because we would know where to look in the sky to find them. And a telescope could collect light better than the human eye could.
Okay. Well, probably couldn't see Venus during the day, right? Because it would be between us and the sun. But it says they saw it in the daytime, but that could have been
it could have been the early morning or late evening at 6 p.m., 7 p.m.
Yes. And that plays to. I mean, Venus, as you said, is closer to the sun than the Earth is. So we always see Venus in our sky to be close to the sun. It's either just a twilight object. Mm-hmm. So it would definitely be visible kind of at the interface between day and night.
Okay.
I certainly prefer to think of this phenomenon, and I assume Tom and you would agree, Doug, but I like to think of this phenomenon as something natural that God utilized in his plan to bring the Magi there, rather than a supernatural phenomenon that has no explanation. That's another alternative people say as well. This was just something that God did, like the cloud of smoke in the Exodus. It's just something he put in the sky for them to follow. That's not very satisfying for me as an answer. Yes. It's possible, but I don't like to think of things like that.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because that's what I was thinking is like, really? We're going back to, the Exodus where...
No, I'm saying I don't want that as an answer.
The way I feel is like, oh, okay, I don't...
I don't think we need to do that, though. I think that's why I wanted to bring him on, because there are possible things that it could have been. These men could have seen one time and followed it, another supernova explosion. It could have been two things.
Well, that's what I like. I like that explanation that it could have been two things. One to get them going. Mm-hmm. Like the triple conjunction, yes. And then the other one, which happened 2 years later. Sure. By the time they got to to Jerusalem, 2 years later, then you have something else.
Yeah, but what are they going to call it? A luminescent body in the sky, a star. Like he said, the word doesn't say just star. So,
right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And, right. What you're saying, of course, there's what astronomers can do to try to probe the mystery of it, but I agree with you completely, and its significance is much more than that. It's much, what it means. It's simply not, a distant astronomical phenomenon. It, of course, has a much greater meaning than that.
Yeah.
He still wasn't in the manger when the Magi showed up, right? He was 2 years old, living in a house.
Right. Well, that's our understanding. We don't know for sure. We think that he probably was already, past the manger time. Yeah, the manger scenes are definitely not what happened. Right. Yeah. But in any event. Well, any other, before we let you go, any other thoughts on it or any other possibilities that as an astronomer you would think about, or I guess I at least have to ask you, what do you think and where do you leave us with this? What would be your guess if you had to bank on something?
That's a very good question. Actually, earlier this calendar year, within Leo, it was actually this alignment, a similar alignment appeared. I was unable to collect the information in time for this for the interview here, and I could try to send it to you guys offline. But and I only know this because the dog got me up early a couple of mornings to let the dog out, and I could look up and see this. Yeah, one reason why I chose my career is what is something you could do fun at night, and then of course no. But anyway, I think honestly, part of me feels like as an astronomer, you want to go by what can you prove, what can you verify, and we have the most information about a conjunction, and we could imagine that this would be a phenomenon which would, if the interpretations of wise men were astrologers, and astrologers, to them, the planets were the most important bodies, to them, such a thing would stand out, and it could certainly be something else. My work is on remnants of supernova explosions in our own galaxy. Now, we know about them, and sometimes when we find a new one, we try to figure out what their ages are, and we try to reconcile them with records to try to see if we can figure out what the age of it is, so on and so forth. But I think that in the end, what it was secondary to what it heralded.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. It's a wonderful way to kind of, as a trained scientist, it's a wonderful mystery to kind of explore. And we, every year, as our technology and our awareness increases, we could say something maybe a little more informed about these things. But I feel like it's best to, never forget that, or never lose sight of it's simply more than just something in the sky, as much as it was a message to us.
Yeah.
And how important that was. And that's something which you should always keep in your mind when you're wondering what this was.
Sure. So, the theological meaning behind it is bigger. But I think the point that we made tonight is that it's not impossible. I mean, I often like to just, for people to understand that as scientists, we don't just have to divorce ourselves from our faith because we can't hold such an idea. I mean, I'm not so much looking for an absolute answer as saying it could have been, a supernova, and it could have been an alignment of the planets. I mean, it's possible that somebody could see that and write about that,
I never thought of it being two things.
I hadn't either, but it sounds like it could be. It's possible. Yeah,
it's more likely.
Yeah. More than likely was. Yeah. So I think they would see that and write about it, and of course, as those oral traditions grow into writings, they're described in various ways. So
okay,
yeah,
good.
Yes, And what you're saying there could very well make sense. It's still a very vibrant field for investigation, and maybe someday we will discover a supernova explosion, which the remnants of one which could be plausible. And are you guys science fiction fans? I don't know if you ever saw an episode of the Twilight Zone, which is about the spaceship that's traveling, and the scientist on board realizes that they have found an extinct civilization, but when he calculates when the light would have been observed on Earth, he realizes it corresponds to the Star of Bethlehem. And it's a very intriguing concept, and it's still it's a remarkable phenomenon which many people, John Q. Public in the street has heard of.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Well, it's been interesting. We've shed some light, no pun intended, upon the star. And I know that Dr. Pannuti is in the middle of finals week, which I understand that because I'll be teaching next semester, and I know how it is. So he's probably busy. And
speaking of time and prayer, yes.
Yes.
During finals week, yes.
I understand. This is my research semester, so I don't have to do it, but next semester I will. So I know you're busy with that, and you're going to be grading. Say hello to your family, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and thank you so much for being here, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, we
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Merry Christmas to you both.
All right.
Christmas.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
You too. Okay, bye.
Okay, that was Dr. Tom Pannuti of Morehead State University. He's an astrophysicist, and he's been helping us with the Star of Bethlehem.
Yeah, and he did help us in my thought on a couple of fronts. And one that we kind of talked about is that there may have been two events. That's one thing. There could have been two astronomical events.
And I really think that seems very plausible because if you look at their, they said, well, something happened on,
on the way there,
7 BC, and that's kind of early. Then something else with another candidate was 3 BC. It's like, well,
that's pretty close.
Yeah, that's pretty close. That's like what?
Yeah, that sounds like when it would be.
Yeah, the two events.
I think it's fascinating that what would have been if you think about it. And I didn't say this during the interview, but really the first event is not so much about navigation, it's more about timing. It's not so much about navigation, it's less time to go.
Right.
It's time to go. So here's the sign, right? Like we talk about blood moons or whatever, This would have been the three planets coming together.
Yeah. Well, it's
Regulus
actually,
or Jupiter.
Well, it's Venus, Jupiter, and the star Regulus.
The star. Okay,
and they would have saw that coming in. And said, hey, there's something coming here, and they would have saw, hey, it's
time to go. And these are wise men who are looking in the sky all the time. They're astronomers, astrologers of that day. They are descendants of Daniel and the Jewish people who were left there in Babylon. And of course, they've been talking about, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. There was a time where everybody was waiting for this big event. And so then they saw the planets come together, and they follow it. Now, they don't need it for navigation. They need it for timing. Then the next one, the supernova or whatever, comet, could have been the navigating.
Yeah, that's when they're in Jerusalem, and they're looking at... But now they would have known... I mean, if they had known the scriptures, they would have known that it was 14 generations from Abraham to David.
Exactly.
They would have known it's 14 generations between David and captivity.
Yes.
And now it's been 14 generations. So what's the year? When's when do we go?
And that's another thing. Yeah.
So they would have said, hey, it's got to be within the next 10 years.
Right. It's got to be sometime soon, or 20 years at least.
Yeah.
So then they see the coming together of the luminescent sky. And
that must be the sign.
And that must be a sign. So that makes sense to me. At least we've got something scientific to explain a biblical account rather than just saying God did it with some kind of supernatural power.
Right.
I mean, sure, God can do anything, but my experience and my understanding is that God works through nature. He doesn't now, I always have the argument that the origin of life and the the soul, as far as man coming out of the caves and becoming social, rational creatures, those two events to me are supernatural because I don't think there's an explanation natural. But other than that, I think God can do things like that. But normally we look for the natural explanations, and that's why this whole show is bringing together faith and science, not trying to separate them and saying science is over here, faith is over here. They're just totally different
and that's
arenas.
Like the 10 plagues of of Exodus, right?
Yeah.
And they have a scientific explanation, and this is why this happened in this order.
There's actually pretty good arguments for that, yeah.
Right. I mean,
I've seen that, yeah.
That
we should talk about that on a show sometime.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good one.
That'd be a good show. But there isn't a scientific explanation for that. And so that's what I got out of Tom's discussion tonight. Plus, we learned a lot about comets and supernovas that I had no idea about.
Well, it is up my alley again. This is
you know more about that than I do.
I love this. This is what I do. Okay.
It's an interesting mix of science and faith. That's what's so cool about it.
Okay.
So I enjoyed it. And we got some interesting shows coming up. We might mention David Limbaugh will be coming up soon on an upcoming show.
Oh, yeah.
And we've also got coming up a neuroscientist, renowned neuroscientist who's going to talk about current. She's a current neuroscientist, PhD. He's going to talk about consciousness and the current understanding of human consciousness and awareness. That's a good one coming up to help explain the soul. All right, but first, this is God Talk, where we rightly divide the line between science and faith.
And this is God Talk, your one-stop audio companion for the curious Christian, the seeking scientist, the dangerous deacon, or the angry atheist. God Talk gives real answers to challenging questions. Please stay tuned for more ways that you can listen to God Talk.
Please visit our website at godtalk.com. Our audio files can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, and many other podcast platforms. You can find all of our God Talk videos by searching Dr. Andy and Doug on YouTube. Please visit our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/Dr. Andy and Doug. Thank you for listening.